Hey, everybody.
Hey, y'all.
Welcome back to another fantastic edition of the show. Thank you for tuning in yet again. We appreciate you, and we don't take it for granted that you're here rocking with Talent and Ty, because y'all could be anywhere on this internet, but you're
so
here
appreciative
with us. Thank you. And if you love what we do, if you hear any gems dropped in today's episode, and I guarantee you will hear some gems dropped in this episode, please send this to a friend, share it on your IG stories, and make sure you tag us at His and Her Money so we can show you love back, because we love to give the love back to you all that you give to us. Today's episode is going to be dope. Yes. Here we go again, out the box.
You were saying the word back, and I'm like, well, we're talking about take back your family.
Come on,
so I was like, I like that. So we are super excited to be talking about take back your family. This is actually a very unique approach that I'm really excited to dig deep in about teams.
We're going to be talking with
family.
New York Times best-selling author Jefferson Bethke. He has written several books that have been super dope. He went viral like a decade ago off a spoken word piece that he did. We'll get into all that. But ever since then, man, he's been communicating the gospel in his own unique way, which I think is super dope. And it's a lesson even in that. Don't put yourself in a box, even though you have this burden to be a communicator of the gospel. There's so many ways that God can use you to do just that. But I digress, because we're here to talk about taking families back. And that's important, right? Our motto here is to take dominion over your money and your life. And so we're going to be dealing with that life piece on today. So as we always say, what do we say, babe?
Get your phones ready. Take
get your notes app.
Get your notes app. Get your notebook. Get your pen, pencil, whatever it is.
Because the gems are on the way.
About to drop.
Hey, Jefferson. Welcome to the His and Her Money Show.
Hello, Jefferson.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. This is a treat.
We are thrilled to have you here, good sir. Been watching you and your journey for probably a decade or so, ever since a spoken word piece of yours went viral. I don't want to mess up the name, but it was Why I Love Jesus But Hate Religion.
Nailed it.
I believe. And been watching you ever since. Now you are a family man, got a wife, children. You got podcasts here. You got books there. You're going around the globe speaking and communicating the gospel. So, I mean, I think it's super dope that we get to sit here and talk all these years later as after we've been watching you from a distance for quite some time now. But for those who are being introduced to you and your work for the very first time, can you say hello to them and let them know what you're all about?
Yeah. So thanks again for having me on the show. Super fun. Yeah. I mean, I'm, ADHD by nature. And so our internet personality tends to take on that persona, meaning we bounce around. I'm always doing kind of different things, dabbling, et cetera. But yeah, essentially, if I could find a common thread, well, first of all, that's the first thing is our job's the internet. We love the internet. We love using the resources available there. I would even consider, I know books aren't on the internet, but I kind of put that in the same bucket of content creation now, right? Which is similar to a lot of the same muscles you're flexing on the internet. So yeah, we love the internet. We love using the internet because I think there's a lot of bad stuff on the internet. I think a lot of us are being malformed, misinformed, and deformed into bad, unhealthy images. You know what I mean? Images that don't make us look more like Jesus. So to me, I think the internet can also be a beautiful tool to reform and to properly form us into the image of Jesus. So we love using the internet. We've been doing that for 10 years and it looks different every day, right? So that's podcasts, that's books, that's speaking, that's little internet businesses, little stuff with my kids and this and that, or, Alyssa, et cetera. But the common thread is we love using the tools and resources available at our disposal to make people think about Jesus in a fresh and unique way. And so I would say that's what we do and what we're up to.
Awesome. Now you are the author of many books, but the latest is called Take Back Your Family. Yeah. Why do we need to take them back, Jefferson? Who got them?
The subtitle gives you the breadcrumb hints right there. I think I actually keep forgetting it, but I think it's like take back your family from the tyrants of like burnout, busyness, something, and the nuclear ideal. So those are what I think have got us. I think burnout, that's an easy one. I think busyness, that's an easy one, meaning like we all would agree to that. And then I forget what the third one is. And then the fourth one is the one that causes the most controversy, where I say we actually need to take back our families from the nuclear ideal. Now, that one, people get a little sensitive on that one for good reason, because I think because that word means different things and certain things to different people. And culture is attacking it at some level. Or another way to put it is culture is attacking family, God's design for family. And culture is using the nuclear family language as the thing they're attacking. But that's not necessarily what I'm saying. In the book, what I talk about is nuclear family, first of all, let's define terms. It's kind of that stereotype you have in your head of like two parents, two kids, 1950s, 1960s, right? And a lot of us are trying to get back to that. We feel like that's an ideal that we are just always full of pressure to attain to, right? When the scriptural model is way different. It's what David Brooks calls the corporate family, right? It's 17 people, it's 21 people, it's 25 people. It usually involves 3 to 4 generations. It usually involves kind of household employees at some level before the Industrial Revolution, right? Where everyone, like an ecosystem, was in the house, is what I'm saying, right? You even think back to when Abraham Abraham chased Lot in, what is it, Genesis, like 13 or 14 are the people getting him in. And it says, Abraham, like when he heard of the need to rescue him, said Abraham grabbed 315 men from his own household. It's like that dude built, like, we just skip on by that, but it's like that dude built an empire. That is a household empire. If on a whim you can just call up 315 men to go to battle with you from your household, that's insane, right? So, I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it more, but that's kind of that real quick. Like, it's just God has a little bit bigger idea than the nuclear idea, is what I'm saying. God has a little bit more multi-generational picture than the nuclear idea, because in the nuclear family, we tend to hit the reset button every generation. You know what I mean? Where it's like get married, have 2 kids, hit the reset button, and delete everything behind you. It even gets talked about in culture, like all of your baggage and all of your wounds is because of your parents. Now, don't let me diminish that. There is real serious stuff that people have been affected by their parents, but I do think we've gone overboard. Everyone blames everything that's ever happened, bad about them. I'm like, oh, that was my parents. So we kind of delete, new generation. And what we don't realize is we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure because we put such a emphasis on, like, oh, they messed me up, I want to delete, that we're almost telling that story to our kids, and then the kids will probably do the same thing when they leave. So it's like this delete generation, it's like reset button, etc. When God wants to kind of connect the generations, one last thing I'll say there, then we can go wherever you guys want, is it's way more multi-generational families and teams is another way that we talk about it, over and against the nuclear ideal. Is so important that we're missing it in plain sight in the scripture, so God himself in the Old Testament wants to communicate about himself. So like God, like the infinite creator, Yahweh of the universe, right, wants to communicate who he is to his people. Now he could say, I'm God the just, I'm God the mighty, I'm God the powerful, etc. The actual thing he ties to his name is being a multi-generational father. He says, I'm the God of who? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So like that's kind of insane, but we don't ever think about that. That God placed on his own identity that he's a God of multi-generational family teams. That's kind of crazy. But yeah, that's I'm rambling, but that's where we're going.
No, this is beautiful. You, at the heart of what you're teaching is this concept of a family team, which I think is fantastic. That I didn't have that thought before opening the pages and following some of the podcast episodes and videos that you and your wife has done, and even you've done with your mentor. So I think this started with a meeting with your mentor in Jerusalem. So can you take us to how this
that was before
became a part of your life?
Exactly. So it was before we were really close with them. That was kind of like our initial meetings of them, some friends who just introduced us. And yeah, I mean, they live in Cincinnati, but they split time in Israel as well, just because of some of the work he does in like tech and stuff like that, or did at that time in his life. And so he invited us over to just hang with him. And it was one of those things, we've all been in those situations where just what you see is just like, you feel like you entered the matrix. You're like, I don't know, whatever's happening in front of me is just different. Your family's different. You guys all love each other. The teenagers aren't trying to leave, they're trying to stay. There's so many people here. It's like every dinner is like 20 people. There's generations, there's grandpas, there's neighbors, there's friends every week, every Friday night. I kind of highlight in on the Shabbat dinner in that chapter in the book. And it was just like, and then to get to the end of like this enormous, amazing 4-hour meal that just seems so sacred and beautiful and rich and deep and kind of what our hearts are always longing for. And them to be like, oh yeah, we do this every Friday. It's like, what? You know what I mean? Like, this is like such a zenith thing I've never seen before. And so then I just kind of started peeling back the onion and the layers there. And it just came down to that. He was just like, I think what I put in the book is, I remember saying like, man, you guys do family weird. That was my phrase. Why do you do family so weird? And he goes, Jeff, we're not the weird ones. He's like, Western Americans are the weird ones. He goes, there's this ancient vision of family that's been around forever that has some bad stuff to it as well, because it's not, through the lens of the gospel. He goes, but you take that vision plus the gospel, plus the scriptures, and you get this really rich, beautiful, awesome blueprint for family that gets to what you said at the beginning, this idea of teams. But yet in the West, we don't realize we're swimming so deeply in this water of individualism, right? So I kind of pit these two against each other. As a lot of our families in the West, we predicate them on this idea that, like, another way to put it is self-actualization, right? Like an individual reaching their full potential, the heights of who they are, and over and against having any limits. Like, it's like that's the goal in life, is we want no limits, we want no one to restrict us, we want no one to hold us back, and we need to reach our full potential. Now, at some level, like everything, there's a seed of truth in that. Like, that's how God created you, was to reach that lot, in that way. But we've created a caricature of it now where we use family as a stepping stone to get our individual desires, dreams, etc. And what we do is we kind of short circuit the process. When I argue in the book that, you look at sports teams, right? Like, or business teams, right? I played sports my whole life. And I remember, a couple of years that I played on some teams, there was these, those classic guys that it's all about them, right? It's about them getting the MVP. It's about them padding their stats. They're kind of like always just like shrug their shoulder at everyone else. Now, there's a phrase we use in sports every single time that happens. We call that person a cancer, right? But yet, weirdly, we like celebrate that in family. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's and the difference is, family has become this place where there's no collective mission. There's no collective purpose. Most families can't say, our family exists to do X, to bless the city in this way, to use our talents in this way, to use our treasures and our finances in this way. Because the nuclear family back in like the 50s and 60s kind of created this ideal of consumption. So it's less about our family pushing out into the world with contribution and grace and creativity. And now family is a place to fill ourselves, right? To get, fat, sick, and dead, essentially, metaphorically, with entertainment, with things, etc. And so, but that's the opposite of a team, right? A team contributes. A team, everyone in a team sacrifices, but also everyone in a team wins. Because some people hear this and they go, well, are you just saying like quash the individual? That's the classic, critique. And I'm like, no, you never see that on healthy teams, right? Healthy teams, when they are all serving the team, everyone actually becomes better than they ever could have been individually. It's actually like a symbiotic relationship where the individual is better when they're on a team. Anytime that there's like a quashing of the individual, that's not a team, that's like fascism or something like that,
Yeah. One of the things that we always say and champion, especially even around our home, is we're Team McNeely all day.
Exactly.
Us two and our three children. Talk about what you saw at that dinner, where you were like, this is weird. This is something that I've never seen before. Can you talk about some of the things that you actually saw, that you felt? What were some of the practical things that you saw this family doing that you knew this was on a whole nother level?
Great question. Yeah, one, there's a bunch of examples. One I saw that night specifically that we've really believed in and tried to do ourselves, and I think it's just powerful but easy. Is almost had a child sneak in right there. Is I would say is storytelling. Okay, so when I was sitting at that table, you got these generations, right? And you got the sage, grandma and grandpa, of the family, and they're just being peppered with questions. It was like 3 hours of questions, and everyone was just eating it up. Right. Like, and really awesome. Like, because here's the thing, in the West, we don't honor old people. We don't honor old people. We don't put them on the seat of wisdom. We don't put them so like, we don't need old people in the West because we have Google, but all of human history needed old people. Like, that was actually like, you would die if you didn't have old people, because, you're going to go the wrong trail. You're going to, I'm going real tribal old school, but like, what I mean? Then you'll go the wrong way and, you don't know how to hunt, whatever. Like, we don't need them. So we've kind of kicked them to the side, in sake of like finding wisdom in Google instead of, hard fought gray hairs. And so that's a big part of it, is like what I would say practically is recenter the people of wisdom, which usually tends to me, the people that have lived a couple generations, recenter them, put them on the seat of honor, and ask them a bunch of questions. We cheat in like a really fun way, where like, I just got this book on Amazon that's called like Grandpa's Journal or Grandmother's Journal. And it is a huge book full of a workbook full of like thousands of questions that you're supposed to, over like years, ask your grandparents, and then like write down the answer for kind of like record keeping and journal. And it's really, they're fun, they're serious, they're depressing, they're sad, they're happy. Like, it's just all over the gamut. Stuff from like, tell us about your first breakup you can remember, to what was your first toy you remember, to tell us the story of when you got married, et cetera, et cetera. But when you do that over weeks and over years, it's crazy how formative it is to a team identity, right? And if you think about it, Every strong team always has a shared mythology. Every team always has shared mythology, shared story. That's what gives them identity. I talk about this in the book. The Jewish community is amazing at this, not just in a micro way, like I'm talking about right now, but in a macro. The reason that they're so resilient, even through enormous atrocities that have happened to them, and even in the diaspora as they've been spread out, is because their mythology is so strong. You can be anywhere in the world and they share, at any country, and they still share the same mythology, like this ethos that defines them as a people. And a lot of other communities have that as well. And it's just shared, bringing that into the micro, bringing that into the family is really powerful. It's right. Like when you go to Chick-fil-A, I thought of this the other day, you look on the wall, and what is the wall doing? A lot of times at Chick-fil-A, there's this wall that says like 1952, Chick-fil-A started, 1967, first store, 1972, like we got bigger. Like it's a mythology. It's collective. It's a collective consciousness, a collective story that fuses an identity. Same with sports teams, right? Like you go through the eras of the sports team and you hold on to that, you talk about that, and you're always repeating it. We have some friends here that are visiting us right now in Maui because we have like a guest house that we rent out. And I just noticed it with their kids the other day. The kids, like the dad started to tell a story of when he was young about something that happened when he was a teenager. And all the kids were like kind of grabbing onto him and interrupting. No, let me tell it. Like, tell him about this part. Tell him about this part. Tell him about this part. And I'm like, that right there is absolute sign number one that they have a shared mythology, that they are that like the kids want to retell the story. You know what I mean? And there's something about that. Like that's super practical. But it just comes with like just doing it, and that journal is a great hack because a lot of people are like, well, where do I start? Grab that journal. And you know what it does too, by the way, because sometimes there's a lot of awkwardness with like grandparents and all this stuff, right? But when it's just questions, everyone's at ease. When you're just like, hey, tell me, just sit back and just tell me, like, tell me this, tell me this, tell me this. They feel comfortable to share. You're not just asking them to like give a treatise or a sermon. You're just asking them like, hey, what was the first bike you rode? What was this? What was that? And it's crazy how that stuff puts them at ease, is really, really fun, and creates this really strong identity without you realizing it.
What do you do in the event? Maybe you don't have grandparents. Like all my grandparents are gone. And so do we ask our parents? Like, how do we incorporate this in our lives when we don't have the grandma, the grandpa anymore?
Great question. Yeah, so I guess I should have defined those terms a little bit better. I was speaking as grandparents to our kids. So what you said, one generation up. So like parents to the adults. But if you do have grandparents as an adult, then that is like you need to be getting out the tape recorder and the camera and getting everything out of them, because that's magic if you still have them around, right? So I would say, but even then, even if you don't have parents, like that's a great question on all scenarios. I would say lean into what you do have, because you still have a story, right? Whether it was even foster care for a season. That's my mom's story. Was in foster care her whole childhood. Whether it was one parent passed away, but you still have one. Like God always wants to work within the story you have, and you still have a story. Like no matter, we're not saying like, be the ideal. We're saying just remember where you came from. That's what God talks about to Israel all the time, of like, make this altar, do this feast, do this holiday, just so you don't forget what happened, where you came from, or how I rescued you. So I would say that's a really easy or good one. And yeah, use so for us, ours is just like asking questions in like a weekly way at a fun dinner with my family and Alyssa's family. But I know people who've gotten out like the tape recorder, and they just like, they're actually doing it for like later. They just interview all the people in their life, and they just kind of hold on to it in the attic. And then 10 years later, maybe they're going to put it together, do something special. I know this was fun. We know a family where some teenagers, because teenagers get into TikTok and videos and all this stuff, cameras, and they're so native to like being YouTubers, etc. Excuse me. The 15-year-old made like a family documentary. Like they thought that like they pointed the skill set that they wanted to use, as becoming a YouTuber, and they pointed it in the direction of their family, and just went around with a camera and asked their grandparents questions for like a couple months, and then edited it together. And it was like, and then what's crazy is the main grandparent, who's kind of like the one that really was like a huge leader in the family, passed away like 2 months after that. And everyone in the family is like indebted to that 15-year-old for doing that. Like they still rewatch it, they talk about it, you know what I mean? And it's like, man, what a sweet memory that they captured all that, So there's like, it's kind of like, it's a whiteboard. Like there's a million ideas you could go with. It's more about just, are you connecting the dots?
Legal & General America is a leader in low-cost, high-quality life insurance.
For nearly 70 years, Legal & General America has been providing financial protection to over 1.3 million families, and businesses.
LGA makes understanding and applying for life insurance easy.
And agents are standing by to help you find the best coverage to fit your family's needs.
All you have to do is go to hisandhermoney.com/LGA to get a free quote now. One of our pro members who's watching this live, she said something similar to what you said. Many successful communities, such as the Jewish and many Asian ethnic groups, have a tradition of honoring elders, which is fundamental to their success and legacy. Mm-hmm. So she brings up a good point. Success and legacy is even tied into that. Yeah. And I think that now our generation, mm-hmm. we have gotten away from asking the wise, asking those, that have gone before us, because like you said, we have Google, or we feel like we know it all now. There's podcasts out there. You don't have to tell me anything. You don't have to show me the way, but your legacy and your success is tied into that.
And I think that even what was said there, that when we do what Jefferson is saying, when we ask those questions, that is a form of honor.
It is a form
We're
of
saying
honor.
What you know, what you've been through, your story is important to us. You know what I mean? And so I think even in this exercise of pulling information from them, we are, or we can be exhibiting honor.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, and as parents, I mean, you're a parent as well too. We have children too. What can we do now to make sure that our children are equipped? Should we tell them our story? I mean, depending on how old your children are, maybe they don't know.
Yeah, how are you walking? How are you and Alyssa walking this out?
Yeah, so I think it's exactly what I just said with the dad a minute ago, who was teenagers are trying to jump in. Like, we're early. We have 3 kids under 10, so we still have a little bit of time. But it is fun to drop those seeds of like that's what's crazy is a lot of people. One of the craziest things when we've gone through this exercise with like just like I said, reading from the journal most times on Friday night to Alyssa's parents, she has said 100 times, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know that." Like you're my parents. I didn't know that because we just don't like ask, or we don't, or another way to put it is the parents don't tell. And so I think it's really fun to really communicate like the love story to the kids of like, this is how we've met over and over again. They should know it front to back. You know what I mean? They should almost get sick of it. This is how like you guys are here because of this convergence. Talk about the story with the Lord of how he saved us, where when we were in dark seasons or dark pits. It's just a lot of storytelling. It's just a lot of say it over again. And what's funny is our daughter, she's 7, our oldest daughter, and she started to do that same thing I just said the other day. And it's like the most life-giving thing ever, where she's like, "Dad, tell him this story. Tell him this story." Or she's like, she wants the story. "Dad, tell me about that one time you did this again with Mom," or, and I'm like, that's amazing. There's something like, we're humans are story natives. Like, it's part of us. We actually just in the West are constantly trying to get it out, push it away. So I would say, just connect those dots. What's fun is I'm still experimenting with the idea, we'll probably do it soon. But that Chick-fil-A example I gave earlier, I'm thinking about trying to think of something like that for the house. Like, how fun would it be if like one wall in the house kind of has this line and there's kind of branches up and down, you know what I mean? And maybe it doesn't even start with us, because I think that's a little bit too much even supportive of the nuclear thing I was talking about. Like, maybe I go back a couple hundred years and I try to research, like, I don't know, was my great-great-great-great-great-grandpa some, bandit in California during the gold rush? I don't know. But I would love to find that out, and I would love to put that on the line. And then I would love to, like, obviously make us the majority of it, because it's like the story we're in. And then, like, have the kids start putting stuff on there. I don't know. So I haven't figured that out, but I think that's a fun idea.
I can see it in my head already. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So two of the things that your book is teaching us to take our family back from is busyness and burnout, right? So you and your wife are super busy. You all are authors. You all are speakers. You all get called all over the country to leave, to go, to speak, and then even when you're home, you all have your internet businesses that you're maintaining. So with all that you have going on, how have you all been intentional? What are some strategies, some tips for people listening to not let their family become the victim of the busyness and the burnout, but to go and take them back from that as well?
Great question. I would say 2 things. The first one is just, it sounds so easy, but it's also really hard to practice, is just Sabbath, like a real 7-day cycle that you live in, right? 5 or 6 days of work, 1 full day where you craft a day of rest and celebrating, you eat good food. For me, and again, it's subjective in the sense of like, you need to do what you need to do for rest, not what other people say is good, right? So another way to put it is like Abraham Heschel, famous Jewish kind of teacher and rabbi, said, if you work with your hands all week, then you should Sabbath with your mind. And if you work with your mind all week, you should Sabbath with your hands. And it's kind of like that allusion to, like, for me, one of the most life-giving things on Sabbath, which is Friday night to Saturday for us, is to go work out in the yard. Now, that's technically the hardest I work all week, if you think about it, because I'm typing at a computer. Do you know what I mean? So like when I'm outside working, it's actually like kind of, I'm sweating and I'm like, dang, I'm out of shape and I got a dad bod, you know? So you would, I guess on the technical aspect, people would be like, oh, that's not Sabbath, he's working, right? But for me, because my job is internet, typing, keys, video, etc., that is Sabbath for me. So for me, I turn off my phone one day a week, same thing, because that is, to me, what's always kind of clawing at me, you know? And so vice versa. So like a day of rest is huge. And then as a family, you have to be good at saying no. Like that's just the simple truth of it. There's too much demands on our life in the West. Like we're more available than we've ever been. Like 200 years ago, you just couldn't text everyone. You couldn't just call everyone. You couldn't just invite them to your birthday party. Like we live a weird, strange life in the West of just activities, of just like, there's so much stuff always, right? And so you have to get good at saying no, or else you'll say yes to everything and your family gets a default no. Do you know what I'm saying? And so, and I find it strange where we're willing to sacrifice for anything else, but we never are willing to sacrifice for other people, against other people, for our family. So another way to put it, I put it in the book, is like, no boss expects when they go to their employee and say, hey, Thursday we have a really important meeting, I'll see you there. No employee says, yeah, well, unless I have something more important. Well, then, you know what I mean? Like, that's just weird. Like, you don't, right? Same thing with hobbies, same thing, whatever. Like, it's weird. Like, it's just expected. Like, this is the schedule. Like, you work and we need you here. It's weird to me that family is the only one that doesn't ever do that. Like, we actually almost feel like this immediately when we get asked to come somewhere, we almost feel this pressure of like, I have to say yes for anything. And so no wonder we're burned out and busy. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have to see it similar to like your vocation of like, no, my family is a vocation. I'm going to commit this amount of time and these things are protected and important to us. And if something impedes with that, then it loses.
Yeah. I love what you're saying and what you're teaching, because I think that it doesn't matter the dynamic of the family. I mean, we're going to have some single parent or one parent households opposed to a two-parent household.
Or blended families
blended families. And so what you're saying, I feel like, can be really applied to
across the spectrum.
Everyone. The spectrum, no matter your family dynamic.
Yeah. And another thing that stood out to me, because this is his and her money, but your mentor and even yourself, the intentionality between what you all do. Like, you all don't avoid trying to build wealth, but you build wealth with the intention of putting it inside the family mission. You talked about how your mentor had a duplex, but they intentionally leave one side open for people that are transitioning, whether it be in their local community or local church. And so they have this asset, but they have this asset to be a blessing, to show the love of Christ. So can you talk about your approach to, and how we can approach not avoiding wealth, but being intentional about putting it inside the mission, the family team mission?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is your guys' bullseye. So, I'd even love to hear you guys, but yeah, I can go on and on about the money conversation, because it's one that I think is a lot of Christians are misinformed or have a bad biblical, vision of finances. So there's so many different ways to go with it. But I mean, I think the first thing I'll say is like, there's a certain amount of resources out there, not just financial even, by the way, but talent, gifting, et cetera. Right. But let's just talk finances. So there's a certain amount of wealth and money and finances out in the world. I would prefer that to be on the Kingdom of Light's team instead of the Kingdom of Darkness's team. Okay. And so I'm going to play my part to make sure that I'm putting that on the Kingdom of Light. Like I don't want those resources being available for Satan and his legion and demons and darkness. Like, that's just an actual thing we need to think through. Like, from a strategic warfare standpoint, why on earth would I want them to have more resources? Okay.
Come on.
No one ever talks about that, but it's true. Yep. Like, from an actual war standpoint,
like just right there, in and of itself should be enough to convince you to get this money thing right.
Especially if you're in the kingdom.
Exactly. And so that's point number one. Point number two is building wealth is not bad. Idolatry is bad. Idolatry is what Jesus is talking about. And here's the thing, like, even people that, are really successful and have a lot of money here, even if we have a couple wins down the years, and we're starting to, build some assets to use, by the way, for other people, not just like to hoard. If Jesus just pricks our heart and says, give it up, then it's gone. Like, Jesus is more important. That's number two. So then, like, listen to Jesus's actual teachings on that. And notice he only went that excessive with that command on the people where the tentacles of finances and resources was wrapped around their heart completely, to the point where it actually made them not follow Jesus anymore. Like the one guy, when it says, I've obeyed every single command, and then he tells them to give up everything, he goes, oh, never mind, I'm out. So like, he doesn't say it to everyone. He says it to the people that are actually like steep, or it's the tentacles of wrapped, so money's captured their heart. So that's 2. And then 3, I would say, the thing that bothers me, and this is kind of going to get a little meta philosophical, but a lot of people who kind of are proponents of what I call poverty theology, of like it's almost more holy to be poor, or it's more, like to, et cetera. What they don't realize is a lot of times their lifestyle is still being subsidized by someone with wealth. So like, like this would be a missionary lifestyle, usually, right? And where it's kind of like, oh, we just never want to have nice things. We never want to have good things. We don't want to save up. We don't want to invest. We don't want to steward. We don't want to multiply. And a lot of those people are being supported by wealthy people giving them monthly. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like,
you saying something now.
The resources come from somewhere. The resources come from somewhere. Right? And so a really prime example of that is that's like in the scriptures too, by the way. So the book of Luke and the book of Acts were written by Luke, right? But if you can read in the first chapter of Acts,
funded by Theophilus.
Yeah, exactly. Those books were commissioned by Theophilus, who is literally just a super wealthy man who bankrolled the entire project of Luke, going around for years to write the book, in which Jesus says, it's harder for a rich man to get through heaven than the needle, and sell all your things. So I'm just saying, like, you have to let that tension hold of like the verses where Jesus is very dramatic about finances is in a book that a rich guy paid for. Okay. So like, let the tension sit with your heart, because that's how it should be. So that's point 3. I don't know. There's probably more points. So then I think a lot of those are kind of the critique, the negative. I think the final one I'll say is, it's when you realize that resources are just a tool. Financial resources are just a tool, but they are a helpful tool to build a family team, to play a game that's multi-generational, right? You look at the Jewish community, and they do this so well, right? And I always laugh too, because like they're so, they're known as like being brilliant with money, wise with investments and finances, but yet they're reading the same book as us. Like that's where they get the actual wisdom, is the Torah. The Torah has incredible, financial advice. And so shouldn't we even be a little bit better, like with the New Testament, not worse, like with Messiah, and what we see there. So I think what it comes down to is it's about a long play, and it's about using all the resources God has given to you to build in a way that can partake in the mission that God's called you, in the warfare that we're stepped into. So there's a lot more details there, but I think it comes down to checking your heart, the idolatry conversation, but also realizing that God wants to, he's called us to reign and rule, and to steward, and to multiply. And when you're not doing that, you're actually dishonoring the image. You're dishonoring the image of God in you, because God by nature multiplies and creates and overflows. You know what I mean? Like in the same, that's how we got here, is the Trinity was so overflowing with love that the cup spilled over into creating these little icons named humans. So it's like, you know what I mean? Like it's this, that's what it does. And so finances is a really good way to show that picture.
So good. He's reaching there.
That's what he does.
So like nothing else. That's what he does. Like we can literally like close the book.
So as we get ready to close this out, we want people to really understand and grasp the concept of family teams and why we need to pursue this. Mm-hmm. So help us as we close out, get to the heart of your message. Why do we need to take our family identity and put it inside of a team concept?
Hey, that's a great question and great point to end on. Here's what I'll say. The short answer, and then I'll explain it, is because it's God's design for your family to take you farther, bigger, and much more, dynamic than you are doing right now. Meaning like God has something, your vision is too small. Most families is too small, too puny, too weak. God actually wants to use you and your family and the teammates, the children, that he's given you on your team, more than you even realize. And that's really, I think, life-giving to realize that, God wants to, he created this team not by accident. Like these kids are on this team not by accident, but because this one has this strength, this one's really emotionally sensitive and can kind of help our team. This one's a really strong leader. This one had like there's a reason your exact dynamic is together. And just because it's the Genesis mandate, right? So this is a hypothetical I always leave with people is, so God creates Eden. Now, a lot of people assume that just like earth looked perfect and amazing, but realistically in the Hebrew scriptures, it's not what it's trying to say. God created Eden as ordered and perfect and beautiful, think trees and plants and animals and fruit. But yet the rest of the world did not look like that. This was like a little prototype, like a little baby section of earth. That was what we think of when we think of, the Garden of Eden. Now, the rest of the world, as we see in Genesis 1 and 2, was untamed, was still chaotic. It was the project wasn't finished. The project of God creating order and beauty out of chaos wasn't finished. Now, he didn't need our help, obviously, but he wanted our help. So he created co-laborers, which is us, image bearers, to kind of, and then commissioned us to go finish the job. Like, hey, go make the rest of the world look like this. Like, I'm going to put you in here to learn it and to smell it and feel it. Now go make everything else look like this, okay? And that's pretty much still the same job today, by the way, for everyone. But then what's interesting if you think about it is before the humans even showed up, God had that problem of like, okay, we need to make the rest of the world look ordered. Now, if we were in charge, we probably wouldn't have picked God's answer. What do I mean by that? Like, if there was a rest of the world that was untamed and chaotic, we probably would have picked, we probably would have created an app, I don't know, created a software, got a board of directors, started a nonprofit. You can go on and on, right? But God creates a family. Like God's answer number one to blessing the world and bringing order was male plus female. Okay. Then it was a unit. And then it was, multi-generational. He says, this is such a big job. You're going to have to have a lot of babies to help you. Right. So then, okay. So now it's multi-generational. So it's a team, the male plus female. Then it's multi-generational. Be fruitful and multiply. And then it's on mission, which is go create and subdue and reign and rule and make order out of chaos. And so I just say like, that's the story that we still get to act out every day and that your family gets to act out every day. You get to become that multi-generational family team on mission and you get to go subdue the earth. You get to go reign and rule and image Jesus. Now that we see, because he recommissions that same job in Matthew 28 with the disciples, because all authority has been given to him. Now he commissions us. Go make disciples, go do this. And that's super important. And so that's what I would leave people with is like, it's just the story that's playing out from beginning to end is that God wants your family to go out and kick back the darkness, and push back the empire of darkness. And you're empowered to do it. You have the skills to do it. You have the God for it. You got the Holy Spirit in you and on and on.
The good news is you gave us a blueprint to walk this out. The book is called Take Back Your Family. So can you tell everybody a little bit more about what's in the book and also where they can pick up a copy?
Yeah. So the first couple chapters is me trying to get real philosophical. So don't let me lose you when you're reading it, of just like really peeling back the layers. Cause you got to really understand, like, how did we get here? The Industrial Revolution and, roles of men and women in the West. And like, I just dig into a lot of like, hey, this is the water we're swimming in and a lot of it's bad. So let's just like, chill. Then like the rest of the 80%, the rest of the book is all about just the practicals. Every chapter is almost like a tool that a team needs to be successful. And so, yeah, and it's anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, etc. But yeah, I'm excited for it.
Awesome. And let everybody know about all that you have going on, how they can stay in touch with you, your podcast, your YouTube channel, everything.
Yeah. So me and Alyssa love having conversations with people and DMs and messages and comments or whatever, having conversations. So yeah, jeffandalyssa.com is the site. And you can kind of find everything on there. You can get my Instagram down there, Alyssa's email, books, other stuff. So that's kind of a hub that holds it all.
Awesome. We'll be sure to have everything linked in the show notes of this episode. Jefferson, man, you laid it out for us and we really appreciate you going deep diving and staying with the practical advice that we can actually put into place. You helped a lot of us out. So really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to come and share with us today.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. That was a blast.